Welcome to TheKillFile, your favorite true crime podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Spears. Each week, we will explore the dark corners of true crime, unsolved mysteries, and murder. Join me as we uncover secrets, investigate evidence, and dive into the chilling details of some of the most fascinating cases. Get ready for a journey into the dark unknown because, in TheKillFile, nothing stays buried forever. Hello there, and welcome to episode 91 of TheKillFile. I am so glad that you guys are back for another story. Before we jump into today's case, a few quick reminders. First off, the Hidden Files will be back soon, but for now, if you would like to check them out, you can head over to Patreon and check out the current episodes to see if it's something that you would be into. The Hidden Files are just $3 a month for 2 bonus episodes that circle true crime but are a little different than our Monday episodes. Things like plane crashes, assassination attempts, and lives of gangsters, just to name a few. They have a little history thrown in with some dark subject matter, and I personally enjoy the stories because they're still dark and interesting. I will let everyone know as soon as I know when the Hidden Files will be back. I have more work done, but for now, I am enjoying the time off as it's almost a full-time job for this, and with the bonus content, it's even more work. I gotta make sure that it's worth doing. Let me know when you guys are ready to get those back on track. Next, don't forget to check out the website, TheKillFile.com. to find our merch shop where we have some funny true crime shirts, other accessories, and fun things for gifts for yourself, and it also helps to support the podcast. Finally, follow us on social media. We are on TikTok, Blue Sky, Facebook, and Instagram. That's it for business. Let's talk about today's case. Today, we are going to be finishing the second part of the Yoo-Young-chul, aka the Raincoat Killer from Seoul, Korea. Trigger warnings for today are going to be murder, brutality, mutilation, and cannibalism. Here we go. Just to recap a little from last week's episode, we learned of the area's first known serial killer, a man named Yoo-Young-chul, whose usual MO was to take the subway to an affluent neighborhood, find a church, and then look for a nicer home. He would watch it for about 10 minutes to make sure that they were home and that no one else was coming and going. After watching the home, and equipped with his homemade hammer, a knife, and gloves, he would usually scale the courtyard wall and head towards the front door and let himself inside. Once he was in, he would basically bludgeon whoever he found inside, killing anyone and everyone. He then usually threw items about or tried to make it look like a robbery. However, he wasn't very good at this because he never took anything. He would usually clean up after himself in the way of footprints or blood, and then he just walked away. On one occasion, he tried to burn the room or house down after he accidentally left some blood behind when he caught himself trying to break into a safe. Once the authorities were able to release his footprint found at least 3 crime scenes and the picture from the CCTV footage of his back, the killing stopped for a while. Little did the authorities know that they didn't quite stop necessarily, but rather the Raincoat Killer took a break and then shifted gears towards other victims. He would now target and lure sex workers as victims. On February 6th, Young-chul took a taxi to a neighborhood called the Imundong and was on the lookout for a victim. He then approached a woman that he mistakenly thought was a sex worker, a 25-year-old woman named Ms. Jeon. While the weather was sleeting on the area, Young-chul approached the woman and asked her where she was going. Her response to the strange man's question was that she was actually about to go shopping. This is when the killer pulled out a forged police ID badge saying that he was a cop and asked her to go to a bar with him. Her response to this was, quote, "You're not a cop, you crazy bastard." Which, yes, girl, I fucking love it. Good for you for speaking your mind, because chances are he was not going to take you to a fucking bar. Miss Jeong started to run away, and Young-chul was right behind her. Before she got to a restaurant that was nearby and tried to get inside, she suddenly fell, screaming for help. Unfortunately, the Raincoat Killer's frenzied attack of 5 stabs to her chest were faster than help could arrive. In March of 2004, Young-chul would call for a sex worker to be sent to his home. When the woman arrived, it was reported the woman and Young-chul engaged in sexual acts, and when they were finished, the woman would head to use the restroom. On the docuseries, the authorities in the case would say that Young-chul would talk about the threshold to the bathroom in his apartment as some sort of threshold between life and death. He felt that he could conquer in that bathroom. He felt that he was in charge in that bathroom. He felt that he was in control inside of that bathroom as he did what he did to his victims. He would use his homemade weapons to bludgeon the woman to death in a brutal attack. Once he was finished murdering the woman, the Raincoat Killer would often decapitate his victims. It was later figured out, after many of the victims' parts were retrieved, that all of the sex workers had their hair in a ponytail with a rubber band, which Detective Kim thought was odd. What are the chances that all of the women had their hair up at the time? Well, it turns out that this was for a horrific, ghastly reason that probably no one would have ever thought. Yoo-Young-chul put the woman's hair in ponytails himself, so that after he finished decapitating the body, he could hang the severed head on the toilet paper holder, allowing it to be drained of its blood. Holy shit. So it was now the MO of the Raincoat killer to bludgeon the women in his bathroom, decapitate them, and in order to remove the body from his apartment undetected, he would use various weapons, reportedly axes, scissors, and knives, to dismember the body into 16 to 18 pieces almost evenly. It was said on the docuseries that Yoo-Young-chul had at one point gone to the hospital to receive numerous x-rays of his own body so that he could study the human anatomy in order to help himself in the dismembering process. I'm assuming that it was so that he could find the weaker spots or the places that would be easier to cut open and remove limbs. Oh my god, it's just so horrific and methodical and planned out. Like, what? My mind won't wrap around the horrificness. After Yoo-Young-chul would finish killing and dismembering his victims, he would then place the various body parts into different trash bags. He would then take a taxi to a specific location that he would bury his victims. Yoo-Young-chul admittedly would use kimchi mixed into the dismembered body part bags in order to help mask the smell. So when the driver would ask what the fuck that smell was coming from the trunk and comment on how awful it was, Yoo-Young-chul would tell the driver that it was aged kimchi from his mother or mother-in-law causing the smell. This would usually do the trick, I guess, because no one inquired as to whether or not he was full of shit or telling the truth. Can you imagine finding out later, if you had been one of those drivers, what exactly that man had placed into your trunk as you had been driving him somewhere? Holy shit. The spot that Yoo-Young-chul chose to bury his numerous victims was near a temple in a mountain area. His thought was something to the tune of needing it to be secluded, and I wonder if he thought because temples are like more sacred, I'm assuming, that maybe people wouldn't go poking around the land close to one out of respect, but that's just my conjecture. It was said that Yoo-Young-chul would bury his victims pretty shallow. In fact, it was less than 2 feet deep and less than 2 feet away from one another. He would use almost the exact same area, not wanting to dig more than he had to. He probably assumed that he would never be caught. The time between the murders of various sex workers became less and less, with the first time being around a month, and then it was cut down to 2 weeks, and eventually it was around once a week. Yoo-Young-chul was becoming efficient, dare anyone say good, at carrying out the murders in the way he did. There were said to be dozens of female sex workers killed in his apartment without anyone the wiser. The pimps of the women, or places the women were employed, were noticing that some of the women would go missing or wouldn't return. However, unfortunately, they couldn't exactly report them as missing as they were running illegal brothels, and some of the women were assumed to have maybe ran away. One night, though, a man called asking for a woman to be sent to his home, but something that triggered one of the brothel owners as knowing that something was off was the fact that the number the man was calling from was in fact the phone number belonging to one of the missing sex workers he employed. The pimp immediately called a detective, and it would turn out that this person would be a crucial informant for the authorities. On July 14th, 2004, around 2 a.m., Detective Phil Zhu said on the docuseries that he had been on a 3-day-long stakeout, and he had finally been able to make it home and get to bed at midnight when the phone started blowing up around 2 a.m. After only getting 2 hours of sleep, he realized that it was an informant calling over and over again. He would tell the detective that he was waiting for the man to call back, but believed that he was the man abducting his sex workers who had gone missing. At the very least, the detective thought that it could be a kidnapping case and wanted to get the guy. However, he knew that he would need a woman to help catch the man. They had a sex worker on standby for when the man called back, and when he did, he asked for the woman to meet him at a public park. The authorities brought the woman over there and watched the encounter. After meeting the man, the woman started walking back towards the authorities. She would end up telling them that the man who had asked for her said she was too tall. The authorities now believe that Yoo-Young-chul said that because he wouldn't bring women that were too big or too tall, as they would be too hard to dismember and dispose of. So fucking chilling. The killer then called for a new girl and wanted to meet her in an alleyway. After doing so, the woman had ended up calling the police herself, saying that this man was a complete weirdo. The police rushed to the area, and because the authorities had known some of the women had been going missing, they ended up taking Yoo-Young-chul in. As they were trying to arrest the man that would turn out to be Yoo-Young-chul, he was resisting completely and with violence, which seemed to throw up some red flags for the police. They also noticed that he had something in his mouth while he was trying to resist. I guess he was trying to swallow one of those flyers for sex workers. I'm assuming so that he wasn't caught with it on him. Maybe he just planned to deny everything. When they got him back to the station, the entire team of people were in the room wanting to interrogate him. The only evidence they really had against this man was the fact that he had called a brothel, and nothing else, really. They suspected that he could be kidnapping them or even killing them, but they didn't have any proof. On the docu-series, Chief Kang Dae-won, which I personally loved, he smacked Yoo-Young-chul upside the head, and this is when Yoo-Young-chul lost his temper and asked who was in charge there. When Chief Dae-won said that it was him, he then told the killer he didn't think that he was their man because Chief Dae-won didn't think that this guy sitting in front of him had the stomach for murdering. I guess when they brought Yoo-Young-chul in, they sort of noticed how clean-cut and what a regular guy this man seemed to look like. They said that the more harder criminals, or maybe people with his criminal record at least, usually have tattoos or sleeves or whatever, or looked the part, and that this man had no tattoos, and nothing stood out to them as particularly different. They said he just looked like a regular man. When Chief Dae-won hit the Raincoat killer again upside the head, Yoo-Young-chul blurted out that the 4 sets of murders, like the ones in the homes, he said, quote, "I killed those old bags," end quote. The authorities assumed that he was lying. They didn't even believe him. They knew those were cold cases, and they didn't think that this man that they were looking at could be responsible for those. Yoo-Young-chul then asked for a piece of paper where the detectives in the room watched him start drawing tally marks. When they asked him what those were for, Yoo-Young-chul replied that those were all of the people that he had murdered. The authorities at this time thought that the man was possibly insane, and since they didn't have any proof on him, they needed a confession. However, Yoo-Young-chul would not confess to them. He asked for someone else to confess to. And when the authorities asked, what, you want a priest? He said no. He wanted his mother. Which shocked the shit out of me. If I was a murderer, I would be so ashamed to tell anyone that I loved that I was the person that was so fucking disgusting or heinous to have committed those acts. But I guess that's because maybe I have remorse and feelings that maybe someone with psychopathic tendencies does not. Anyways, it was said that when he confessed to his mother that he was the person who had killed all of those wealthy people inside of their homes, Yoo-Young-chul's mother was so shocked she actually passed out and they had to call her an ambulance. She had absolutely no idea that he was doing any of the things that her son was doing. To any of my parents out there, can you fucking imagine hearing this from your child? I don't know what I would do. I mean, you don't stop loving your child no matter what they do, right? But also, how awful and disturbing and disgusting. I can only imagine the feelings that this poor woman had at that moment. No wonder she passed out, poor thing. The authorities kept asking if Yoo-Young-chul was sure that he was the man who had committed those crimes because they still didn't believe him. They wanted to take him to the crime scenes to see what he could reveal and see if it matched up to what actually happened. It was said as they took him to the neighborhood of one of the houses the crime scenes were at, they stopped short of the house, asking him to point out which house it was, etc. When he described the details of the murders, none of it matched. For example, in the house where the grandmother or elderly lady Miss Kang, her daughter-in-law, and the daughter-in-law's 35-year-old son was killed on the stairs, well, while talking about how the 6-year-old woman, the daughter-in-law, was found, he would say that she was lying face up, when in fact she was lying face down. Things of this nature, little things that were off. This led to some of the authorities believing that this was not their killer, and actually, it had them letting their guard down a bit. At one of the homes, a dog ran up to the group, and Yoo-Young-chul bent down to play with the dog in a friendly manner, which really led the authorities to think this guy was full of shit and did not commit these murders. They started to think that he's just one of those people that wanted to take claims of the murders that he didn't actually commit. Yoo-Young-chul is not a dumb man. He was playing the authorities, making it seem like he falsely confessed to the murders by getting details wrong. It got to the point where the authorities had considered letting the man go, but they didn't, thankfully. Chief Dae-won, he knew this man was indeed the killer, and he knew that Yoo-Young-chul was fucking with him. While Yoo-Young-chul was at the station, he started to have an epileptic seizure and was allegedly foaming at the mouth. He had asked to be uncuffed as he was having the seizure, and then he collapsed. They uncuffed the killer, and they were able to get him into a chair to sit down. This would turn out to be a big mistake, as some of the detectives had stepped out of the room. Each had assumed the other was looking after their suspect, giving Yoo-Young-chul a chance to escape, and escape he did. It did not look good for the authorities to have lost a suspected serial killer who happened to leave without any damn shoes on, even. Many of the officers who were now off duty for the night were called back in. I believe they said it was about 100 people, in an emergency so that they could search the streets all night for Yoo-Young-chul. With 10 million people living in Seoul at the time, it wouldn't exactly be easy to find him. Yoo-Young-chul ended up meeting up with his mother and his sister at his place after he had escaped. He put his weapons, which included his homemade hammer, a knife, scissors, a shovel, and a sledgehammer, in trash bags, and disposed of them in dumpsters around the area. Because the authorities knew that it would look bad that they had lost the suspect, they immediately asked for paperwork to be written up so that they could say that he was actually released on purpose, not that he escaped. Not a great way to take some responsibility. The red light district was checked, thinking that that's where they may be able to find him, but they couldn't find him that evening. I'm not sure how long he was gone. I don't think it was more than like a day, maybe two, but I believe he was caught the next day. But one of the detectives on the case happened to see a man who was holding an egg on his eye to reduce the swelling, crossing in a crosswalk, and recognized Yoo-Young-chul as dozens of officers started chasing him and brought him down, and they were able to rearrest him. He actually told them he was a heinous criminal and that they were all no match for him. Yoo-Young-chul would eventually tell the police that he planned on killing 100 people and would have kept on killing had he never been caught. Yoo-Young-chul would end up making a full confession, including maps of the 4 home murder scenes that were all correct to a T. All of the locations, weapons, everything. He wanted to brag about his crimes now that he knew he was caught. One of the authorities working on the case who dealt with psychopaths would say that they often feel that they're superior to others and that this was normal of their behavior. Turns out he didn't know how right he was. When it came to why he killed so many wealthy people in their homes and then turned to the dozens of women he killed, Yoo-Young-chul had thought himself to be doing God's work, and many thought that he had a godlike superiority complex. He would say, quote, "Women should not be sluts, and the rich should know what they have done. Go fuck yourself, you giant piece of shit. How dare you fucking judge anyone else after the shit you do." Oh my god, I fucking hate this man. Eventually, Yoo-Young-chul would take the authorities to the grave sites where he buried his victims. He had marked the various graves with normal, random items to show himself where he had buried them, things like bottle caps. As they were digging, it was downpouring, which made it really hard to actually dig up the earth. When the rain cut back after about an hour, they would make a discovery of the first bone. After digging up body parts, figuring out that he'd killed at least 19 people, but they knew it was more, the news was out, and reporters flocked to the area. In order to conceal his identity, which I don't know why they do that, it must be like a Korean law or something. One of the officers had in his car a mask, a hat, and just happened to have something else that they put over the man that would actually give him his trademark name, a raincoat. Yeah, turns out the dude had nothing to do with raincoats. It was all just because this officer was in a hurry to conceal his face and he had a raincoat in his car, and the reporters and media started calling him the Raincoat Killer. I thought that this was actually kind of funny because of all the things that you could be called when he was so proud of his work, he got stuck with the fucking Raincoat Killer. Fuck you, dude. You suck. Many of the flesh and bones were still intact as they were being dug up, but the authorities would say the smell was so bad that it was actually hard to breathe as they were working. I can imagine not only the smell of death and decomposition, but kimchi as well would be a mix of foul-ass stenches. The citizens of Seoul were extremely fascinated with the killer and the case. They showed people trying to watch as the bodies were being dug up, which, of course, people want to know what's going on. We are all morbidly curious as human beings. I don't really think that's weird at all. As Detective Kim found out, it would take 2 weeks for the DNA to come back in order to identify all of the victims. She was unsatisfied. with tears in her eyes in a seriously profound moment on the docuseries. She would explain that this wasn't good enough. So she set out to take fingerprints from the women's remains to try and match them herself. It was like she was desperate to do anything to help. She would speak to the fact that the liquid coming from the parts oozing out made the printing extremely hard, and said that she would have to wipe and try over and over again. She would realize that on just one set of fingerprints, she ended up wiping over 160 times, desperately trying to get a fingerprint to give these women and their families the bodies back and their identities back. She was later told that as she was holding the wrists of some of these women's remains, that she had actually been talking out loud to them by herself, asking them to help her so that she could help them. She painstakingly got each and every print she needed and was able to identify those poor women by the end of the day. Kim Si-hook is now a captain and director of the forensic investigations at Seoul Metro Police, as well as others, and is a fingerprint expert. So fucking cool and good for her. As Yoo-Young-chul was making his confessions and the authorities made their way to his studio apartment, the bathroom looked clean, of course, but when they used luminol, it lit up glowing incredibly bright from all of the blood. At the time, Kim Si-hook was still a detective, so Detective Kim saw that there was some flesh on the ceiling and blood, and they could use it as evidence. The authorities would learn that the weapon, or the hammer, that was a homemade weapon, was something Yoo-Young-chul made himself, specifically for murdering and bludgeoning people to death. Yeah, he had used the head of a sledgehammer, but he had shortened the handle or made his own handle considerably to make it easier to do close-up, and he custom fit it to his own personal grip as well. I mean, this fucker planned all of this out to a T and actually custom made and fit his own bludgeoning tool. Like, what in the actual fuck? The markings that were honestly quite remarkable, if you see how they affected the human flesh, were from a sledgehammer head, which is why it was so hard to identify them, because parts of a sledgehammer are sharper in some areas and other parts are blunt. Another part of the story that I won't be able to go into because we're already at a longer episode, but this case of the Raincoat Killer, or Yoo-Young-chul, would change policies and the way that things were done when it came to the authorities out there in Seoul. The case, it wasn't handled very well, and not only were people demoted, reprimanded, and denied promotions due to how things were handled and the show that the authorities were putting on, but they also had been caught telling Yoo-Young-chul that if he would confess to other murders that he didn't actually commit, that the corrupt bastards out there would take care of his son until he was out of college. And when they were caught for it, it was obviously a big deal. So, although the case was awful, good things would come from it, as we often see in the world. It takes horrific shit to happen for real change to be made, which sucks. As Yoo-Young-chul was making confessions as to the blood-curdling murders that he had committed, there was also speak of some cannibalism. Ah, yes, cannibalism. Yoo-Young-chul would admit that on 4 different occasions with his victims, he would actually remove the liver. I'm assuming this is during the dismembering part of the sex workers that he killed, and he admittedly ate parts of the livers of those 4 victims. So I was a little curious. An AI overview would discuss how eating beef liver in Korea is considered a delicacy and is often served raw as its own side dish with some sesame oil, and it is usually fresh from that day. I guess eating liver has a ton of minerals like vitamin A, copper, iron, and B12, and it's believed to help improve things like energy, eye health, and it is even traditionally believed to help with vitality. So, I wondered if he would have consumed the livers in order to feel stronger, or if it was just the thought of consuming his victims made them a part of him, or maybe just even curiosity. I have no idea. These are just my musings as to why he would have. I'm always curious. Of course, as we know, this happened often for some god-awful reason with serial killers and murderers alike, but sometimes people, this sick, develop a following of sorts. People had apparently created a fan club, calling it, quote, coolest murderer Yoo-Young-chul's fan cafe. The person who owned/created the club had a message that, according to the Chosun Daily, said, quote, I hope this becomes a cool Yoo-Young-chul fan club. Please have a good time. End quote. Ugh, I don't understand this type of stuff. I mean, I absolutely understand becoming fascinated with a killer and wanting to know everything about them, where they came from, what they did. Hi, hello, welcome to the Kill File. But as far as being like, quote unquote, a fan? No, thank you. Why? I also often wonder, like, are they just a fan of the chaos and the anarchy, and when it came right down to it, they would hate to see what the psycho has done? Or are they actually fans of the fact that this person killed other human beings in a grotesque way? I mean, what if it was them or someone they loved? Would they still be a big super fan? Probably not. I guess when the club was created or whatever, people were, of course, outraged and backlashing it, asking the creator if they would really be a supporter of Yoo-Young-chul's if their parents found out they were. Like, would you stand by their actions, basically? It was eventually shut down. Yoo-Young-chul would be charged with 21 counts of murder, arson, burglary, improperly disposing of dead bodies, and even impersonating a police officer after his capture. He would tell the authorities that his goal was to kill 100 people, and that if he had not been caught, he would have went on to kill 100 more women if he could have. After Yoo-Young-chul was arrested, the police took about a week and a half to figure out what the charges were going to be to bring to the prosecution, and as Yoo-Young-chul was being transferred, there was a mother of one of the victims who had screamed, quote, "The police's insincere and incompetent investigation killed my daughter." This was screamed as the poor mother of the victim rushed at Yoo-Young-chul and the police officer standing with him to take him inside, and the whole encounter would end in something that afterwards became infamous. I guess as the woman rushed towards Yoo-Young-chul, the officer kicked the woman in the side of her chest and she tumbled down the stairs. I saw it on a clip. It did not look good for the police, who were already under so much scrutiny for not catching the area's first serial killer for so long. They also may have never caught him if he hadn't basically confessed so quickly. When the mother of the victim was kicked, it was already being broadcasted on live national television, so there wasn't even a way to remove what happened from the media or the public, and it became a huge outrage for the citizens. The first time that Yoo-Young-chul had appeared in court, he would admit his guilt and confessed that he had actually killed 2 more people than the 21 that he was already being charged with. He then said that he was going to refuse to come back to court on his next appearance. He was arrogant, saying that the judges were basically not important enough to punish his sins, and that he almost seemed untouchable in this world, but muttered that he himself was the one who gave his life up. As he was leaving the courtroom, it was reported that he turned to the gallery and apologized to the victims themselves for his actions and said he was sorry. When Yoo-Young-chul was again brought back to court for his second appearance, he said out loud he didn't want to attend trial anymore, but the judge snapped back that it really wasn't up to him. Like, what? You thought the court system would be like, oh, you don't want to come to court anymore? Oh, then you don't have to, you poor thing. Like, fuck you, man. He also admitted in court that there were actually 5 more victims, saying that one of them was a pregnant woman, and one of them was a minor. This is when he admitted the ones he had actually taken credit for before, which I didn't include in the case since they weren't actually his crimes, were a lie, and that's when the police had promised to provide things for his son through college if he took credit. I guess when court adjourned for that particular day, Yoo-Young-chul jumped over the railing and tried to make it to the judges, saying that he didn't want to come back to court. And as the judges were leaping out of their chairs because he almost made it to them, he fell, and a bunch of guards got to him. Also, I was confused as to why it said judges, not just judge. I had wondered if that was like a common practice to have more than one judge in a Korean court. So after doing some research, I guess it is common practice to have 1 to 3 judges per case. And unlike here in the States, if they do have a jury, it's voluntary. I also read that the judges can take the jury's thoughts into account, or they can ignore them, and they can use their own opinions and proceed as they please, which I found interesting. So, if I understand it correctly, the reason that they have a few judges is to decide whether the person is guilty or not, and the sentencing. I kind of find that interesting. I mean, obviously people could abuse their power, but imagine what it would be like here if there was just 3 random judges put together to decide on evidence and whatnot instead of a jury of your own peers. I wonder how different our court system would be if this were the case, instead of the tactics that the lawyers and the prosecutors used to win over the juries, right? Interesting. While being held, Yoo-Young-chul was said to have passed out a few notes to reporters and guards, stating that he was repenting for his actions and that he actually felt bad for the victims' families. Interesting how they always feel bad after they're caught or spend a little time in prison or jail, yet when he was caught, he said that he would have killed 100 more women had he not been caught. In those notes, there were some subtle notes of possible thoughts of suicide, which would cause Yoo-Young-chul to be watched around the clock, and on October 3rd, Yoo-Young-chul would attempt to hang himself with some electrical wire around a fan that was mounted on the wall around midnight. This attempt was immediately stopped. During one of his appearances in court, one of the people in the gallery cussed at him as he was coming into the courtroom, and Yoo-Young-chul made a break for the person, only to be thwarted by the guards. And before he could re-enter the courtroom again, he had to sign a piece of paper stating that he wouldn't cause any more problems, which to me is just fucking silly. Like, what is that actually gonna do? Apparently others agreed with me on that point. During the court proceedings, Yoo-Young-chul was reportedly staring at the families of the women that he had killed, and he said, quote, "They were abnormal women. They deserved to be caught." End quote. Yeah, that's a whole lot of regret, huh? Prosecutors in the trial wanted the death penalty for Yoo-Young-chul's murders and would cite not only his past criminal record saying that he was never really a contributing member of society in the first place, and the fact that his murders were motiveless, but to top it all off, they spoke to the fact that even during this very trial, Yoo-Young-chul was seen telling the victims' families that those women deserved to die. In South Korea at the time, the people who were handed the death penalty were sentenced to hang. In response to the prosecution wanting the death penalty, Yoo-Young-chul would say that there would one day be another Yoo-Young-chul out there, and that he was thankful for the death penalty and would spend his time repenting before he was put to death. On December 13th, the sentence of death would be handed down to Yoo-Young-chul, with the judges commenting that his victims were vulnerable, and they hadn't, at the time, seen a person commit these types of crimes in their country's history. South Korea would eventually abolish the death penalty in their country, which left Yoo-Young-chul on death row for years to come. One source said that when South Korea was actively putting people to death, it wasn't uncommon for them to carry out the death penalty on 20 to 30 convicted peoples a day. Yeah, Yoo-Young-chul's name remains infamous in the fact that because of him, the term psychopath was used by some psychologists for the very first time in public. According to an article in YTN, fellow inmates of Yoo-Young-chul state that not only does he bang on the doors of his cell and yell out, quote, "Hey, don't you know who I am? It's me, the psycho. Open the door. Even if I kill you, I'm going to be executed anyway." End quote. They also stated the guards won't enter his cell because they're too afraid. Anytime they have to go in, he's tried to bite them or spit on them and acts in a manner as the other inmates believe that he's really trying to show them exactly how psycho he can be. As far as I can find, this psychopath is still alive in prison to this day. I'm going to leave you guys with a quote from Yoo-Young-chul himself that actually sends chills down the spine in a creepy and eerie thought that just picturing it freaks my shit. Quote, "Do you know when the scariest moment was for me while committing these atrocities? The moment that shocked me enough to make my hair stand on end was, it might be hard for others to understand, but it was the moment my son called while I was dismembering the body. He wasn't startled by the ringing of the phone. Rather, upon hearing my panicked voice, he asked, 'You still haven't recovered from your cold, Dad?' And replied, 'Dad, I know everything.' It felt like he was saying, 'Don't do that,' and it sent shivers down my spine." And that, my friends, is the story of Yoo-Young-chul, aka the Raincoat Killer, cannibal, rapist, murderer, and all-around fucking psychopath. Oh man, this crazy-ass motherfucker, am I right? One of the most chilling things about this case to me was the fact that this man literally put the sex workers' hair in ponytails to hang their decapitated heads from his toilet paper roll so that he could drain the blood from their heads. Like, what in the actual fuck is that? I mean, murder is awful in all shapes and forms, period. But I think many of us can agree that when it comes to things like dismemberment, It's like a whole other darkness inside some people. And the fact that this guy just hung their heads where he could see them as he was cutting up their bodies just freaks my shit. And is something that my mind can't even wrap around. Real life, that happened. What? I guess he had said after his son called and he had asked about his cold that he felt like his son knew what he was doing and was telling him it was wrong. I don't know why he said, I know everything. It must have been during the conversation, but he was so freaked out that he had to stop dismembering his victim in the middle of what he was doing, and he went to eat because he was freaked out before resuming the dismemberment, which a psychologist later talked about the disconnection from any feelings in that moment for Yoo-Young-chul, that he didn't seem to feel empathy or guilt for what he was doing, but rather he needed a distraction for himself, which he found by eating. Eating! After dismembering a fucking body. Ew, ew, ew. Just an absolute nutbag, in my opinion. I also couldn't believe how brutal he was in the first killings in the homes, bludgeoning people to death right as he walked in. It's just so fucking scary. They didn't even have a chance. I also don't blame the guards in the prison for not wanting to go into his room. It sounds to me like they need to put one of those Hannibal Lecter masks on him so that he can't bite people. What the fuck? I say put that fucker down. God forbid he ever escapes. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed learning about this disgusting freak as much as I did. And remember to lock your front doors. And if you happen to be a sex worker for a job, please carry around a weapon with you and wear your hair in a pixie cut so no one can ever put your hair in a ponytail. Come on back next Monday when we will cover another case here on the Kill File where nothing stays buried forever. Stay safe, you guys. Bye. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today. A few quick reminders before you go. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on your platform. It will help the podcast grow and other true crime lovers to find us. Also, check out the website, TheKillFile.com, where you can suggest a case, find our merch shop, and submit a listener file. Follow The Kill File on your favorite social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok. Of course, you can always subscribe on YouTube as well. Find all of the links for the socials on the website. Come back on Mondays wherever you get your podcast fix when we will cover another case on The Kill File where nothing stays buried forever. Stay safe, you guys. Bye.